The true will.
Never-
Yeah.
That's God's will, and if you see it as God's will, then you can turn it into a mitzvah.
That is a good
Then
one.
mitzvahs will come from it,
That is a
Yeah.
good one.
if you see it as God's will.
What's the difference between a human and an animal? Humans are on 2 feet. Animals, for the most part, are on 4, right? Because animals are on their 4s, where do they always look? Down to the ground, right? They are bound by the material reality of this world. They are bound totally to their nature. They can't, become anything that they're not. So the lion can't wake up one day and say, I don't want to be king of the jungle. I don't want to be ferocious anymore. I want to be a little sweetheart. Nope, not going to be a sweetheart.
So you kind of say, I identify as a pussycat.
It can't become. A lion has to be a lion, right? And so, and it can't defy its nature, right? Right. A human being is created on 2 feet because we have a choice. We could look down like the animal and act like an animal because we have an animal soul in us, so we could act that way. Or we could look up to the heavens above. And Adam, the word Adam, which we're called Adam, you can be Adama, you can be similar to above. So you can choose what we want to be. What do we want to reflect? Just our animal nature or the divine nature that we have within us? Most people actually abdicate choice because, and sometimes we all do that in our day-to-day routine, that we just live on autopilot, which means you're not really choosing to live in a divine way. You're not even choosing. You're just abdicating choice, and you're living by default, living by default, based on the animal soul, which the default of the lion is to be the ferocious king of the jungle, right? The default of a bird is, flying and, whatever else it does, right? Whatever its default nature is, it will only follow that. It takes effort. It takes effort not to live by default. It takes mindfulness, awareness, not to live by default, right? Yeah. Welcome to Tanya today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zich in Kadesh, Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We learned today chapter 16. Chapter 16 brings to full circle the teachings from chapter 9 that speak about the normalness of being human, which means to choose. Choose not to live by default. How do you not live by default? The only way not to live by default is to use your soul. Yes, but specifically your mind. That's what makes us different than the animal. Animals have some form of intelligence, but the intelligence is only there to serve their instinct, right? So when they're hungry for lunch, they will never, ever say, you know what, I'll push off lunch because I'm going to learn some Tanya now.
Intermittent fasting is good as well too.
Yeah, but an animal will never say that, right? Lunch is lunch. And by the way, you look like a pretty good candidate for lunch. Right? As opposed to the human being, as we learned in chapter 12 and has been repeated through the various chapters we've learned, is Moach Shalat Alalev, that the mind has dominion over the heart. That even though my heart may have a desire for something, I can go au contraire to it. I can do the contrary of my heart's desire. So I don't have to be ferocious, I could be sweet. I could choose. I could choose that, right? That's something that we learned. So, and this is the important principle regarding the divine service of the Beinoni. And remember who we are. We are BITs, Beinoni in training. We're in training. That the essential rule for us is that we govern the nature of our left ventricle of the heart, where the animal soul is, and the instincts of the animal soul by the divine light that is in our mind, in our brain. Right? So what do we need to do? Rule over the left ventricle of the heart, where the animal soul is, by the means of mind over the heart. Now, what does it mean, mind over the heart? It means that one needs to think about God. One needs to think about your relationship to God, what God needs from us. Meditate upon the ways of God that will then give you the strength of the mind over the heart, that we can turn away from evil and also just do good, right? In order that ultimately, from what our mind knows of the truth of God, our relationship with God, what God needs from me, that should enter my heart, and I should have a feeling in my heart that I should desire to cleave to God. How will I cleave to Him? Well, exactly what we're doing now. Learn Torah, do mitzvahs. That's how you will cleave to God. Okay, that's an upright person. The mind feeds the heart. It brings you then to action of your hands and your feet in doing for Hashem. But what if someone's intellect and their understanding is not capable of producing a real love, a palpable love in your heart? Right? What happens if that doesn't occur? That you should have a fiery passion to cleave to God. What happens if that isn't there? Instead, you have the hidden love that's in the recesses of the heart, but it's not really palpable in your heart. What happens then? And the reason might be, as the Alter Rebbe says in a footnote, is because the soul that you have is a soul that's not capable of doing that. Right? It's a limited soul, which in our generation, I suggest that's for the most part who we are. Very limited. That we, how many times do you know something to be the truth, but it doesn't bring a feeling in your heart for the truth. We have limitations. But here says that the Alter Rebbe, and this is the Chiddush, the novelty of chapter 16, that the heart that comprehends the wisdom of the mind, the understanding of the brain, even though it doesn't excite you with a love and awe of God, but merely it's an understanding heart of God's greatness, right? And that therefore brings you to have an awareness that it's fitting to pine after God, to cleave to God. But you don't really feel it in your heart. But in your mind, you know that that's fitting. It's appropriate, right? That you should have that. It's called an intellectual love, right? So love in the intellect. How could there be love in the intellect? Isn't love in the heart? No, because ultimately, what gives birth to anything in feelings is the mind. When you, not the thought. I mean, it's the thoughts of the mind, but it's the mind that does it, right? The mind gives birth to feelings. Right? In other words, very simple. When you have a perspective on something, that's going to be then your feelings about that thing. So if your perspective, your understanding in your mind is that Tanya is amazing, God is wow, right? Torah and mitzvahs. So that's going to give you a feeling in your heart towards it. If it leaves you cold, right, then you won't have feeling in your heart. So what does it mean? It means the mind is what gives you emerges the feeling in the heart, brings an emergence from the feeling of the heart, right? So that means, as in any birth, when a mother gives birth to a child, well, before she gives birth, it's in her. Then it comes out. So the same thing in the intellect, before it emerges, it's in the intellect, the emotion. But it's the way it is in the intellect. So it's called an understanding, or it's called an intellectual love. when it's given birth, full blown, so then it's a palpable feeling in the heart. But that might not be something that we're capable of because of the lack of our soul. And it's therefore not something negative about who and what we are, but this is a reality. But the very fact that it brings me to action, right? That it's fitting and proper, that I should have a full heart feeling towards God and what he wants from me and with the mitzvah that he wants. It doesn't have that, but it brings me practically to do the mitzvah. Then the Alter Rebbe says that the language is this is a complete service of God. Because in the end, what happened? It's your mind that brought you to do the act. Right? So there is a form of love in the mind, again, intellectual love, that brings you to what we also call an understanding heart. Well, what does it mean an understanding heart? Heart is about feeling. What do you mean understanding? That's intelligence. No. Again, just as giving birth, you have to have that which you give birth to before it's given birth to. So in the intelligence, there's the emotion. So likewise, once the emotion is given birth to, there's still intelligence in there, that which gave birth to it, the intelligence. So that's called an understanding heart. But sometimes it's not giving full birth to the feeling. It's not palpable. It's not palpable in your heart, right? It's only an understanding heart. It's an intellectual love. Alter Rebbe says that's okay. Because what's the ultimate point? Is it brings you to act towards God. That you actually learn Torah. That you actually gave tzedakah. You actually put on tefillin. You lit Shabbos candles, Shabbos, kosher, and so on. You did the act of serving God. Because that's the most important thing. Because today is about the action. Tomorrow it'll be about the reward, about the experience. So you didn't have the experience in your heart. You didn't feel it. That's okay. You did it. That's what's most important. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. But does it mean that the soul is to be transformed eventually? It's because the soul may not be able to have the capacity to feel, but in time, because we are in time, the soul can expand.
No, even the Beinoni. Forget about us being BIT. This is speaking about the Beinoni himself. That it could be that the Beinoni will meditate upon God, think about God, in order to produce a feeling of love for God. And it doesn't happen. Not in a palpable, full, complete manner. The Beinoni we're talking about, not about BIT. All the more so BIT, right? Even the Beinoni, it can happen that it won't be a palpable feeling of love. It'll be understanding heart, intellectual love, but not a full, fiery passion in the heart towards God. Alter Rebbe said that's okay, because you were mindful of it, and therefore it brought you to act towards God. You learned Torah because of it. You could have spent your time eating breakfast instead, but because of your meditation, thinking about God, led you to now study Tanya. It led you to give tzedakah. It led you to daven. Led you to, observe this mitzvah, that mitzvah, and so on, instead of doing your personal thing. So that means it led you to the actual service of doing for God. And that's the ultimate point, right?
Regardless of the emotional.
Regardless of the emotion, inability of having full emotion towards God, which is the upright way. Upright way is when you're standing, all right? You have that mind that brings to the heart, that brings to your hands and feet in action to do, right? And that's the chiddush, that's a novelty, because you would think, whoa, what do you mean? You don't have that feeling. The Alter Rebbe now says that actually is hinted, that is actually hinted in the teachings of our sages, right? In other words, the Alter Rebbe is introducing a novelty, but he actually says that novelty are already in the words of the sages. In the Talmud, it says that when a person has a machshava tova, a good thought, and the person doesn't end up doing it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah for the Maisa, God joins it to the good thought to deed. So simple meaning, the Alter Rebbe does bring over here, the way it's simply understood is, let's say you were going to wanted to do an act of loving kindness for your friend, and in the end, your friend doesn't need it. So God considers it as if you did it, because your intent was to do good, right? But the Alter Rebbe says that cannot be the full meaning of this, because then it should be, it's as if you did it. It should have said, as if you did the act. It doesn't say as if you did it. It says God joins it to the act. Meaning, what does it mean? You had a machshava tova, you had a good thought about God, you meditated upon God, you thought about him, right? Thought about God. It was someone who was not a chassid. He was a religious Jew, not a chassid. And a great scholar in the Talmud and Jewish law. And he became a chassid, and he came upon his old teacher. His old teacher said to him, "Why did you go away from our way, our path? Why did you become a chassid?" So I'll tell you why. Because I became a prophet, becoming a chassid. So became a prophet? Says, yeah, I can read minds. I can read minds. So he says, okay. So he says to him, so read my mind. He says, you're thinking about God. Says, no, I'm not thinking about God. Well, that's why I became a chassid. Right? To think about God, right? And to meditate upon God, God as creator, God beyond creation, God in your personal relationship, God to be found as in the Maimer of Basi Lagani, in the lowest of the low, that Or Safe is being revealed, right? All of that, and you have full awareness of that. Machshava tov, that's a good thought, right? That's a good thought, right? So, but it didn't bring you to a feeling. It didn't bring you to a full-blown feeling of being revealed awe and love of God, right? Right? It didn't do that. Which if it brought into because the thought itself cannot bring you to action, right?
This thought can bring it to action.
The thought itself, by its normalcy, which your godly soul, ordinarily will not bring you to action, right? Like the absent-minded professor, he lives in the world of thought, right? So he doesn't even know, he doesn't know what's up and what's down, right? Because he doesn't live in the world of action. He lives in the theoretical world of ideas, right? Well, ideas won't lead you to action unless it's the thought of thinking about God and about the realness of God, right? And so ultimately, even though it goes through, so it has to go into your heart, because your heart is physical, right? And it pumps the blood to the organs. So even though here it didn't physically give you a palpable feeling in the heart, but it nonetheless, God connects it. That's what it means. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzvah for l'maisa, God connects it to the act. Since you're thinking about God, and you're meditating upon what God needs from you. Thinking about God means, thinking about a mitzvah of God, right? And you're contemplating it. Thinking about God as creator. So God provides it that it should be clothed into action and it should be actually elevated, right? Because the love and awe of God are in the intelligence of the brain and the recesses of the heart, which won't lead you to action. So you need God to give that, to make it soar on high, that it will lead to action, right? And he connects it, and it will bring you to action. And through that action, the mitzvah that you do will have wings, the right and left wing, the love and awe of God, and will help it to soar and have wings that it becomes eternal, your act of the mitzvah. That's very powerful. So this is the idea in chapter 16, the intellectual love, which is very important for our generation, to know that even though we're not going to get true feelings of an attachment and feelings that are palpable in our heart, but we shouldn't feel diminished because of it. If it led us to do for God, that's amazing. Okay, any questions?
I have a question, Robert.
Yeah.
How long would it take, theoretically speaking, from that thought to traverse to the heart? I know it's
Depends who you are. The Rebbe was by Fabringen, Purim, 1958. He said a lot of l'chaim. A lot of l'chaim. He was like in a very, and then he said that he said that the Tzemach Tzedek once by Fabringen also said l'chaim, and he put his hand over his head and thought about the presence of God, and that brought such an awesomeness to him that the mashke completely evaporated. And so that everyone like this, just telling the story as if not, but how do we know that? Because after that he went into a very deep pilpul, Talmudic exegesis that was like very, very profound and deep, that which would not normally be, when you are kind of, elated in that level that you would do. So, but that's a Rebbe. So, a Rebbe, the mind and the heart are on the same plane, meaning what he knows, he feels automatically. That's a Rebbe, right? A Rebbe, what they know, that's why it says by a Rebbe, he's head and shoulders above the people. What does it mean? Because his head is to our shoulders, to our heart. His head is equal to heart. In other words, what he knows, he instantaneously feels. That's like,
That's why the rest of us, there's a dichotomy between.
exactly.
what we
It goes through the neck,
understand and appreciate
right?
And what we actually.
It goes through it goes through the neck, and the neck reduces what you know, that when it comes to the heart, you already not necessarily know it. Okay, Frank has a question. Did I miss your question? I saw it here somewhere. Okay, let's see. Right. It means that it's not enough only to have a good positive thought towards a friend, but we have to execute and translate the thought into action. Yes? I mean, yes, that would be a good, yeah, it has to be, yeah. But sometimes if you had a negative thought towards that person and you change it to a positive thought, and you're thinking good about that person, so then that's also something, right? But yeah, to reach out is definitely then an act of loving kindness. Absolutely. All right.
There was a person who came, one Jew, and he came and slapped another Jew. For no reason. And the other person started to become totally enraged. all of a sudden another Jew runs up to him, says to him, give me, my daughter needs to get married, give my daughter a blessing. He says, right now I have to give a blessing? He says, yeah, right now. So he takes a deep breath and he gives a blessing for his daughter to get married. And all the rage disappeared. And he said, and we learned from, and by the way, his daughter, and we learned from this that if you take the negative feeling and you turn it around to the positive, you have such a power. The negative feeling has such an incredible power that if you take out that negative and you use all of that negative for a positive result, then it has a power beyond just doing the positive.
Yeah,
Because it took away
transformed.
transform that negative.
Greater light comes out of darkness. Greater light coming out of darkness. Exactly. Love of God or self-preservation. We're talking about the love of God here.
You have to give a blessing to my daughter right now.
Would you say the feelings follow actions, meaning that you may not have these feelings until after you do the act of love and the kindness, pray, etc.? Very good what you're saying. Very good, Jeff. So here we're talking here about the mind, because everything we're learning from chapters 9 through 16 now, and will culminate with 17, is the mind having dominion over the heart. So there is a way about doing the action that will bring to the love, but that's not the discussion now. That'll be another discussion. So very good what you're saying. It's very true what you're saying, but not the path we're taking now. We're taking the long way now. The long way is using your mind to develop into your heart, or to whatever it develops into the heart, even it's just a knowing heart, and then brings to action, as opposed to do the act that will bring then to the love, which is, we'll learn about that further. Not now, though. Excellent question.
By the way, just to add to that answer, Rabbi Avram Twersky,
Yeah.
Rabbi Dr. Avram Twersky of blessed memory, he teaches something right along the lines of this question that says, you love the one to whom you give.
Right.
So that brings out love. When you show love to someone,
Right.
that brings out love.
Yeah.
You don't
Totally.
love the one from whom you get.
Right.
You love the one to whom you give.
Yeah. Right.
That's
Well, in that way, when you think
Right.
about that person, right, and then give,
right. Even you
so
didn't
then,
feel like it.
right, and then, but you thought about that person,
You
right,
didn't feel to give. But you
and
said,
right,
that's what I should do. I should show this love.
yeah,
And then you love that person after that.
Yeah.
You love that person because you gave to them.
but yeah, here we're
Love
speaking
the
about
one-
that you love God,
Right. It's
but you,
another-
right, a different,
I
right,
understand.
right, it's top down. The other one is down up,
Right.
right, and we will deal with that, not today. All right, folks. Rambam, don't forget tonight, Torah studies at 6:30.
So,